Welcome to a free on-demand webinar presented by Michigan Alliance for Families. We partner with experts from across the state to offer live webinars to help answer the questions we encounter most frequently. Our webinars are recorded and saved for future viewing. Handouts for our webinars can be requested through our webpage, michiganallianceforfamilies.org/webinar. Remember to keep up with Michigan Alliance for Families on Facebook, and be sure to check out the other videos on our YouTube channel. Follow-up questions to this webinar can be directed to us at info@michiganallianceforfamilies.org. Today's webinar topic is planning for what happens after early on. Hi, Sandy.
Hi, welcome. You've selected a webinar in a series of webinars related to early on. My name is Sandee Koski, and I'm one of Michigan Alliance for Families trainers. I travel throughout Michigan helping families and those who support them understand all things related to early on and special education. This webinar will focus on planning for what happens after early on, planning for the time when your toddlers are becoming preschoolers. Early On is Michigan's early intervention program for helping families whose infants and toddlers have developmental delays or are at risk for delays due to certain health conditions. Early On is Michigan's early intervention program covered by the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, or IDEA, Part C of that federal law. This webinar includes the use of 4 worksheets. You can request a copy of these worksheets by emailing info@michiganallianceforfamilies.org. So how about we get started? Planning for what happens after early on starts with your family. It starts with beginning to think about what kind of learning and experience your child needs in the preschool years, and it begins to prepare them for kindergarten. This is an exciting time. So let's get started with having a vision for your child's life. This is the first worksheet. It's called the Life Trajectory. It can be used for thinking about a person's life at any stage. Notice those little circles at the bottom. They represent the different times in a person's life. Today, we're just going to be thinking about going from a toddler to a preschooler, keeping in mind that ultimately we're moving towards kindergarten. Think about shooting an arrow. You need to have a target at which to aim, and the arrow might go off course and not land where you'd like it. The solid lined arrow aims at a box that says vision for a good life. What does a good life look like? What kinds of things would be present? Begin to think about what you want your child to experience and learn as a preschooler, taking you towards a vision of a good life. Write a few things in this box. The dotted arrow takes you towards a box that says, what I don't want. Think about experiences and events that move you in a direction away from the things that you listed in your vision of a good life box. And write a few things in the what I don't want box. This is an important first step in planning for what happens after early on. Feel free to stop this webinar and take some time to think and write information in both of these boxes. You can set this worksheet aside because we'll be looking at it again at the end of the webinar. This is the first tool in planning for what happens after early on. This webinar will be covering information and resources related to these 5 things you need to know. The first one is inclusive early childhood programs. We will look at research results regarding the impact for both children with and without disabilities who participate in a preschool that includes students with disabilities. The Individuals with Disabilities Education Act is the federal law that governs special education. Timelines. The Individuals with Disabilities Education Act includes a required timeline for the planning process. Transition plan and conference. Transition refers to a period of time when your family is preparing to move into the preschool years. The law requires a plan and a conference. A free and appropriate public education, or FAPE, and least restrictive environment, LRE, are the foundation building blocks for special education. So let's get started. What does research tell us about the impact for both children with and without disabilities when they are educated together in a high-quality early childhood preschool program? There is an abundance of research related to the benefits of educating children with disabilities alongside their non-disabled peers in an inclusive, high-quality early childhood program. Here is what some of that research reveals. Students with the highest needs can make significant developmental and learning progress in an inclusive setting, and that children with disabilities in inclusive settings experience greater cognitive and communication development and demonstrate stronger social emotional skills than children with disabilities in separate settings. So I'm the parent of a child with a disability, and I'm also trained as a speech and language pathologist. When I was looking for preschool programs for my son, I knew that he needed to have good language role models. I also knew that he needed to learn problem-solving skills, and yes, even 3-year-olds can problem solve with their friends. So I made these the priority when looking at preschools. Research also looks at the long-term impact of children with disabilities being educated with their non-disabled peers in the general education classroom versus students who are educated in separate special education classrooms. The findings show long-term benefits include fewer days absent from school, higher test scores in reading and math, as well as higher probability for employment and higher earnings. Research also shows that children with disabilities in inclusive classrooms demonstrate more social interaction with peers, larger networks of friends, and more socially competent compared to children educated in separate special education classrooms. I have a friend whose son with a disability is now in his 20s. Throughout his school years, he was educated in the general education classroom. The social skills he learned from his non-disabled peers, as well as the friendships he created, have resulted in a social life that is pretty much the same, if not better, than most of his friends without disabilities. Finally, research also shows us that children with disabilities benefit from inclusive early childhood programs, giving them the opportunity to learn greater compassion, empathy, and more positive perception of classmates with disabilities. The educating of students with disabilities in classrooms with their non-disabled peers introduces those peers to a world that includes disability. The kids who went to school with my son, they don't know what it means to go to school without a person with a disability. For them, it's normal. It is these peers that will grow up to work in jobs, become managers or supervisors, who will not need to be taught about disability during a staff development meeting. They know disability. They learn how to accommodate and how to develop relationships. To them, hiring a person with a disability is just part of life. If you are interested in knowing more about the research, these summaries were taken from the policy statement on inclusion of children with disabilities in early childhood programs, a policy statement issued by the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services and the U.S. Department of Education in 2015. So let's start by looking at what preschool looks like in Michigan. Each community has different kinds of preschools. These preschools are available to all preschoolers. There are public school preschools, as well as licensed private preschools, and of course, staying at home with mom or dad or a family member. Research supports the benefits of your child with a disability being included in a preschool with children without disabilities, and the law requires, to the greatest extent appropriate, preschoolers with disabilities attend a preschool with children without disabilities. In most communities, there are some kind of public preschool programs. Great Start is a state-funded preschool program for 4-year-olds whose families are low income, and preschoolers with the following factors that may place them at risk. 1, a diagnosis with a disability or identified developmental delay. 2, severe or challenging behavior, especially taking into account those that have been expelled from daycare, childcare, or preschools. Primary home language is other than English, a parent or a guardian with a low education, abuse and neglect of a child or a parent, or environmental factors such as a parent lost through death or divorce. So checking into Great Start may be an option when your child reaches the age of 4. Head Start is a free preschool for families with low income, and it has a percentage of spots that are reserved for children with disabilities. School districts, some do offer preschool programs and some do not. Oftentimes they are run by the community education program. And then there are early childhood special education programs, which is a preschool program that is just for children with disabilities. There are also private preschool options, and they vary in each community, but they could include Montessori preschool. This uses a method of education designed by Maria Montessori. There are those that are in-home, some licensed preschools that are run in a home environment. Community preschools such as a cooperative preschool or a child care center that offers preschool programs. Oftentimes, there are churches that offer religious-based preschool programs. And finally, there are some families who simply decide to keep their preschooler at home. So this is your next worksheet. And its purpose is to get you thinking about the different kinds of preschool programs that you want to know more about or that you are already aware of. So on this worksheet, in the first column, is a list of those different kinds of preschoolers. I want you to circle the preschool options that you know about. And in the second column, I want you to write the name of preschools that you know about in your community. This could be a preschool your other children went to, or one that your neighbor's kid went to, or one that you have driven by and wondered about. Feel free to stop this webinar and take some time to complete this worksheet. If you're unfamiliar with some of the options or don't know anything about them, you can also use this worksheet to circle those, and you can use it to talk to your service coordinator. This is the second tool in planning for what happens after early on. You can set this worksheet aside with the life trajectory worksheet, and later we'll use these 2 worksheets plus a third one to make an action plan. Feel free to stop the webinar and take some time to complete this worksheet. So let's switch gears and learn a little bit about the laws that govern special education. The first law is the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, or IDEA. It is the federal law that governs special education. There are several parts to the law. I'm only going to cover these 2 parts. Part C of the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act focuses on helping the family meet the developmental needs of their infant and toddler. It is also referred to as early intervention. The early intervention program in Michigan is called Early On. Service coordination is a key component to Early On. It is the service coordinator, or sometimes called a primary service provider, who will help coordinate your individualized family service plan services, identify community agencies and resources to help families meet the needs of their child. Part B of the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act focuses on providing special education programs and services to eligible students. Section 619 specifically addresses preschoolers. Other sections of Part B cover students kindergarten through high school, or in some circumstances until age 21. So here's where things start to get just a little mucky. There are some families who receive only services through the Individuals with Disabilities Education Part C, or early intervention services. But there are some families whose children receive both services underneath IDEA Part C, early intervention, and special education services. The second law is Michigan mandatory special education. Michigan's law makes special education available starting at birth for infants and toddlers who are determined to be eligible. Remember, in the previous slide, I mentioned that the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act provides for special education services starting at age 3. States can do more than the federal law, they just can't do less. And in Michigan, this is one of the places that we do more than the federal law. We make special education available starting at birth for infants and toddlers who are eligible. It is important that you know if your family is receiving Part C only services or Part C and Michigan mandatory special education. It is not uncommon for parents to not know that their child is receiving special education services. For example, speech therapy is a special education related service. However, there may be other sources providing speech therapy. If your toddler has been receiving special education services under Michigan's law, they will need to be determined eligible under the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, Part B, by their 3rd birthday. Determining eligibility is part of the transition planning. The eligibility categories are the same for Michigan mandatory special education and the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, Part B. During the process of determining eligibility for Part B, it is possible that your child will be determined eligible under the same category they currently are, or they could be determined eligible under a different category, or your child may no longer be eligible for special education because their development has made such great progress. Next, we're going to take a look at 2 different worksheets. One is for Part C only, and the other is for Part C and special education. This is the worksheet for families whose children receive Part C only services. In the left-hand column, all of you have a service coordinator as a service under Early On. So write service coordinator underneath Early On. Next, list any other Early On services you are receiving. These services are listed on your Individualized Family Service Plan, or IFSP. If you're still not sure what to write in this column, use this worksheet to talk to your service coordinator. You can use the right-hand column in a variety of ways. You can use it to list your concerns about preschool. You can use it to list the things that you think are important to look at in preschool based on your child's needs. Feel free to stop this webinar and take some time to complete this worksheet. This is your third tool for planning for what happens after early on. Set this worksheet aside with the life trajectory and preschool options worksheet. Later, we will use these three worksheets to make an action plan. This worksheet is for families whose children receive Part C and Michigan Mandatory Special Education. In the left-hand column, all of you have a service coordinator as a service under early on. So write service coordinator under early on. Next, list any other early on services you are receiving. These services will be listed on your Individualized Family Service Plan, or IFSP. If you are still not sure what to write in this column, use this worksheet to talk with your service coordinator. Next, list any special education services that your child is currently receiving. These services will also be listed on your Individualized Family Service Plan, or IFSP. If you don't know which services are provided by early on and which ones are provided by special education, use this worksheet to talk with your service coordinator. In the middle, if your child is currently receiving special education services, they were determined to be eligible in one of 13 categories. This information is written in the eligibility portion of your Individualized Family Service Plan. Circle the one that applies to how your child is eligible. If you're still not sure, use this worksheet to talk to your service coordinator. The right-hand column under special education, list the services that you think your child will continue to need or will need in preschool. You can use this sheet to talk to your service coordinator about your concerns and your child's needs as you plan for preschool. Feel free to stop this webinar and take some time to complete this worksheet. This is the third tool for planning for what happens after early on. Set this worksheet aside with the life trajectory and the preschool options worksheet. Later, you will use the three worksheets to make an action plan. Preparing for early on services to end is a process that may take more than one meeting. It is important to know that early on ends for every child and that every child must have a transition plan written into their Individualized Family Service Plan, or IFSP. This is true for Part C only families, as well as those whose children receive Part C and Michigan Mandatory Special Education. Under the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act Part C, transition planning may start as early as 2 years, 3 months. However, it must occur by 2 years, 9 months, or 90 days before your child's 3rd birthday. For children who might be eligible for special education under Part B, a transition conference must occur at least 90 days before your child's 3rd birthday. You also need to know that early on staff will notify the local school district of a child who might be eligible for early childhood special education, Part B of the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act under Section 619. Let's look at what goes into transition planning. Transition planning can help good transition planning, sorry about that. Good transition planning can help move into the preschool years less stressful for your family and for your child. This planning is a time for you to ask questions and plan for the future. Depending on your child's needs, this planning could require more than one meeting and needs to identify what your child's needs are to make this smooth transition. Each family and each child is different. You can use the 3 workshops I've highlighted in this webinar to talk to your Individualized Family Service Plan team. The transition plan is embedded in the IFSP and includes the steps for exiting early on. If your child has not been receiving special education services and you are concerned about their development, talk to your service coordinator about requesting a special education evaluation and express your concerns. You must make this request in writing, including your concerns, and make sure you sign it. We have sample letters on our website, and your service coordinator can tell you where to send it. You should expect a written response to your request within 10 school days. You will be asked to attend a meeting where you can expect to discuss your concerns and determine what kinds of evaluations will be done. Or you will receive a written notice explaining why they are refusing to conduct the evaluation. Contact Michigan Alliance for Families if you need assistance or more information. If you do not have concerns about your child's development, make sure to ask who you should contact in the future if you do become concerned about your child's development during the preschool years. Children who are determined eligible for special education under Part B of the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act will be going from an Individualized Family Service Plan, an IFSP, to an Individualized Education Program, or an IEP. You will experience a change in focus. An IFSP focuses on the family and the family's needs to support their child and learning, whereas an IEP shifts the focus to what the child's educational needs are in order to access and make progress in the general education curriculum. If your child is potentially eligible for Part B, special education, early on we'll convene a conference between your current service providers, you, the family, and representatives from your local school district. The purpose of this conference is to plan for your child's transition. The transition conference is necessary to help the family know what lies ahead and what they can do to make the process move smoothly. The IEP meeting may occur at the same time as the transition conference, or the two may occur at a separate time. If people directly involved in conducting the evaluation or assessment are unable to attend the meeting, arrangements must be made for that person's involvement through other means, including one of the following: participating in a telephone conference call, having a knowledgeable authorized representative attend the meeting, or making pertinent records available during the meeting. There are some important things that you need to know. The school district cannot do evaluations or assessments until you, the parent, have provided written consent. Before you sign giving your consent for the evaluations, you should fully understand what evaluations will be done and why they are being administered. Evaluations are done to determine eligibility for special education. The local school district is responsible for assuring that the necessary evaluations are completed. A team of qualified professionals and the parent of the child will make the determination of eligibility. If determined eligible, you will be asked to consent for your child to receive special education programs and services. You will be signing to consent for special education. Your consent remains in effect as long as your child receives services or until you revoke your consent. This is your initial consent for your child to receive services. You are not agreeing to any programs or services in an IEP. If determined eligible, the IEP team which includes you, the parents, use information from the evaluation, parents' concerns, and information from other sources to develop the IEP. When developing your child's IEP, your input related to your child's strengths and what helps them learn, as well as your child's weaknesses and what gets in the way of learning, are crucial is information for the other members of your team. You should understand the skills and or behavior your child will be learning. These will be written as goals and objectives, as well as how often you will receive progress reports. You will be involved in the discussion for the need for accommodations or modifications, and the amount of services your child will receive. Once the IEP has been developed, parents need to take time to read through it and ask questions if there's something that you don't understand. It's okay to take time to read over the final IEP and ask questions. When the IEP is finalized, a representative from your school district will sign the IEP, indicating that this is their offer of a free and appropriate public education or an offer of FAPE. This will be done using a form. To give you written notice. If you disagree with the IEP, you have the right under state and federal education laws. Look for Michigan Alliance for Families webinar on dispute resolution. A lot needs to happen before your child's third birthday. Eligibility for special education must be determined. You need to sign consent for special education services, and if eligible, an IEP needs to be written. And special education services must be ready to start when your child turns 3 years old. If your child's birthday is in the summer months, then the IEP team will need to plan to ensure that the IEP is developed before recessing for the summer months. And it's up to the IEP team to determine if the child will wait until the following fall to receive services, or if the child will need the services immediately. If your child's birthday is in the middle of the school year, early childhood special education services can start as early as 2 years, 6 months. You may be wondering where your child will receive their special education services. When you are involved with early on, services are required to be provided in your child's natural environment. Starting in preschool, it is required that your child receive a free and appropriate public education in the least restrictive environment. So let's take a look at what that means. During your time in early on, your services were probably provided in your home or maybe in a child care center, the place where your child typically spent their time. Starting in preschool, the school district is responsible for providing a free and appropriate public education, oftentimes referred to as FAPE, to a preschool child with a disability, and they must make available a full continuum of alternative placements to meet the needs of preschoolers with disabilities. A school district may provide special education and related services to a preschool child with a disability in a variety of settings. This includes a regular kindergarten class, public or private preschools, community-based child care facilities, and the child's home. If the IEP team determines that placement in a private preschool program is necessary for the child to receive a free and appropriate public education, the school district must make that program available at no cost to the parents. The Individuals with Disabilities Education Act requires that the IEP be written to support a student with a disability to be educated in the least restrictive environment, or LRE. This means that to the maximum extent appropriate, a child with a disability must be educated with children who are not disabled. Further, special classes, separate schooling, or other removal of a child with a disability from a regular education environment occurs only when the nature and severity of the disability of the child is such that education in irregular classes with the use of supplementary aids and services cannot be achieved satisfactorily. In addition, the IEP must include an explanation to the extent, if any, to which the child will not participate with non-disabled peers in a regular class. Before a child with a disability can be placed outside a regular classroom, the group of people making the decision about placement must consider whether supplementary aids and services could be provided that would enable the education of a child, including a preschool child, in a regular educational environment setting to achieve satisfactorily. A free and appropriate public education in the least restrictive environment is core principle in the federal law, the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act. We are coming to the end of the webinar, and it's time to start developing an action plan. This is when you will need the action plan worksheet. You will also want to gather the other worksheets that you worked on during this webinar. The Life Trajectory worksheet gave you an opportunity to think about the future and a vision for your child's preschool years. The Preschool Options worksheet explored the different types of preschools, where you identified ones that you might want to know more about, as well as preschools that you're familiar with in your community. You'll use the Part C worksheet, where you identified the early on services that you're currently receiving, and begin thinking about what to look for in a preschool that would best meet your child's needs. Or the Special Education worksheet, where you identified the early on services that you are currently receiving, as well as the special education services. You identified how your child is eligible for special education, and you began to identify the special education services that you think your child will continue to receive. So now is the time to consider all this information on the worksheets and put it all together. You may want to consider who else needs to contribute information to these worksheets, what information you want to share with your service coordinator, what additional information you will need from your service coordinator, and begin to determine what your priorities and next steps. You are not alone. Michigan Alliance for Families has regional parent mentors who can help you. The following slides give you information about Michigan Alliance for Families and our resources, including the number to call to reach the parent mentor in your area. These resources can give you more information that may help you make decisions or feel better educated as you begin to transition out of early on and into preschool. There are some things that you need to know about Michigan Alliance for Families. We have resources to help you learn about IFSPs, special education, IEP, and your rights. And these include our comprehensive website that is continuously updated to provide you with accurate information. Check out our Transition to Preschool page. Our 800 number will automatically connect you with the parent mentor that covers where you live. Sign up for our e-newsletter. Our parent mentors regularly schedule workshops and small learning groups. Check out our YouTube channel for videos and webinars. Our parent mentors live throughout Michigan and are available to support and mentor families to become more educated so that they can better partner with the education system to get the best possible outcomes for their child. This is a list of our webinars. These webinars are a good place to start, and you can link to them on our website or directly from our YouTube channel. This is a list of documents that are related to the information in this webinar. You can find a link to the Family Matters. They are brief one-page documents produced by the Michigan Department of Education Office of Special Education to give families information on a variety of topics related to special education. You can find these on Michigan Alliance. You can find a link on Michigan Alliance for Families website. The PACER Center has 2 documents you might find useful, and you can find these by going to PACER's website or Google search the titles. I hope you found the information in this webinar useful. I hope you found the information in this webinar useful. If you need assistance, then call our 800 number and talk to one of our regional parent mentors.
Thank you for your time, Sandee.